Hello, everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Brain Talks. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. Well, recently we came out with an interactive guide on genetics, and frankly, I was surprised at how many of you downloaded it. It's obviously an indication that a lot of people, as genetic testing becomes more available, a lot of people are finding out their genetic status for diseases like Alzheimer's. So we thought today we would dedicate Brain Talks to speaking with Dr. Doris Zallen. She is a bioethics professor and coming to us from Virginia Tech, and is here to speak on weighing the pros and cons of genetic testing. Doris, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so, this world that we live in today is incredibly different. And in terms of how much information is at our fingertips, when I was launching Being Patient, I think I got 4 or 5 different companies to run my genetic testing because I wanted to see how the information was presented to itself, on the forms. But really, what I was kind of astounded at is some pretty serious information on disease status are going to people who may not really understand the implications. So can we just start there and really talk to us about whether or not people should really want to have this information?
Well, when I started out, I was not a bioethicist. I was a research scientist working at the lab bench and developing genetic tests. Now, this was in the early days of genetic testing, and I got to meet real people, not just samples, DNA samples or whatever. And what surprised me was that some people wanted their genetic information for whatever disorder I was working on, but other people really didn't. And I was very perplexed by this. And over time, actually, this question about what's genetic testing about and who should have it and why would people want it or not want it became central to me. And to answer that, or to at least try to answer that, I did interviews with people, with genetic counselors and genetic professionals, of course. But I also wanted the real world experience of people who had considered genetic testing, people who considered it and had it, and people who thought about it and didn't have it. And there are many reasons to have genetic testing and to get that genetic information about yourself, but there are many reasons not to. And in the books that I wrote about genetic testing, the main point I learned from these people on the front lines, the professionals and the people with real world experience, is that preparation is important. You have to think about it and decide whether it's going ahead with it is right for you.
Right. I think one of the issues, however, is a lot of people, at least in the beginning stages, maybe people are more aware, but I know especially with, some of the home testing kits, they were offering people information. And we hear this within the Alzheimer's community. There are people who had no idea they had a genetic link to Alzheimer's, but found out through these tests. So obviously, so do you think it's necessary really to educate people on what they may find out before they actually find out?
Absolutely. In fact, that is the main finding. The main thing I've learned and I've tried to transmit in my work is that preparation is key. You have to think about whether the testing is right for you. And as part of thinking about and this is what I've learned from the people I interviewed, and there were over 350 of them, so I got a pretty good range of experience, that there are several different areas you really have to consider as part of your preparation, as part of thinking about. And I can describe those to you if you'd like.
Yes, please.
The first is, do you have a family history? Is there some reason that you might be at higher risk? Because people with a family history for Alzheimer's do have an increased risk just from the family history. So what's your family history? Do you have a reason to be concerned? The second is, will the information you get from the test be of value to you? Now, for tests for Alzheimer's risk, the ApoE4 test is what I'm, talking about. You don't get a yes or no answer. You don't get an answer, oh, yes, you will develop the disorder, or no, you won't. You get a risk, a probability, and that probability changes over time. So you're not going to get a yes or no answer. You're going to get a number, a probability, a range of probabilities. The third thing people should, this is what I've learned that they should think about is the timing right? Because genetic testing and finding out this information comes, with some anxiety and some stress. And it's probably not a good time to have genetic testing if you have other concerns or pressures in your life, if you're moving or have job issues or a sick relative. So is the timing right? And the last is, do the benefits of getting this information outweigh some of the burdens that the information can bring? So those are areas, 4 areas that people need to think about as they make a decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because we've interviewed people from the patient population, or people who have gotten genetic testing. They're not really patients, but who, some of them, have gone into PTSD from the news, and others, it inspired them to really be proactive about their brain health, right? So 2 very, very different outcomes based on the individual. But and I think, interestingly enough, I don't know with your study, but did you feel that more people really want to know about their genetics, or most people don't? Like, what did your research, what insights did you take away?
Uh, you know, it's hard to measure that. I think people are interested. Almost everyone is interested, and we talk about genes all the time, and genetic testing's become, so commonly used, not only in research, but also, independently of the medical community, through online do-it-yourself genetic testing companies that offer their services. So I think most people have an interest, and we talk about genes, and they have an interest in their genes. When it comes to genetic testing, I think many people proceed into it and then regret it because they have unanticipated effects, such as PTSD has happened. But also there are effects. Genes are shared in families, and there are effects not only on the person being tested, but on their relatives, their siblings, their parents, their children. And so there's this added dimension of genetics that people, discover. And also, I guess, and the reason many people may go to outside the medical community is that they don't want their genetic information misused.
Right.
They don't want it misused, especially by insurance companies or by employers. So there are all these concerns. And that's why it's really important to think about this ahead of time so you're prepared, instead of having testing, getting a result, and then fretting over some of the issues you hadn't thought about.
Absolutely. Now, I know you've done a bit of research, or you are familiar with the Alzheimer's community. I think you've built a tool for ApoE4 assessment, which is the Alzheimer's gene. But before we talk about that, what I want to know is, if someone comes to you and says, I have a family linked to Alzheimer's, should I get a test? What specifically related to Alzheimer's do you tell them they should consider?
Well, I'll tell you, people don't come to me because I'm not at the front lines with genetic counselors. So I really can't speak for that situation in which people are speaking with real genetic professionals who are going to make those tests available or not for them. I I do urge people to not rush headlong into any kind of testing, but to give it a lot of serious thought. And if they can, to consult with their relatives and get their feedback. And I think it's a serious decision. I know a lot of people, especially with do-it-yourself genetic testing, do it just for fun, just to find out, things about themselves. But I think it's really important to stop and think ahead of time and make an informed decision and not rush headlong into it.
Okay, we have a question coming in right now from Kim, who's asking, she says that my mother-in-law and two of her brothers have had Alzheimer's. What is the likelihood of my husband getting it too? How is one tested?
Okay, well, as I mentioned a moment ago, or a few minutes ago, there is an increased risk for any disorder, of any of the common disorders like cancer or heart disease or Alzheimer's disease, if there's a family history. That's why doctors take family histories, before they examine you. So yes, I would imagine that if there's a family history, that a person is at higher risk. The risk, I guess the population risk by age 85 is 10 to 15%. So that goes up, that about doubles. But you have to be careful here too, because sometimes Alzheimer's is misdiagnosed. And there are also, for disorders like Alzheimer's, the common health disorders, non-genetic factors that are terrifically important and can't be ignored. Diet and other health factors and trauma. So it's not just a calculation. It's very complicated, and that's what's so frustrating and challenging in this field, is that you can't give precise numbers. But with close relative, with properly diagnosed Alzheimer's disease, the risk does go up.
Yeah, and then now you developed specifically a tool for APOE4, is that correct?
Yes, I mean, we had all this collective wisdom from people who had genetic testing, which I collected in my book. But I thought we'd have to make it more widely available, because people are going outside the medical community online on their own to get genetic testing. And so we drew from those findings in the book, the fact that you have to know your family history, that the timing is important, that you have to know what the test actually provides, that you have to weigh the advantages and the disadvantages. And we created a tool, an educational tool, a decision aid that could be made available online for people as they started thinking about genetic testing. Now, while we were doing this, we consulted with focus groups. I mean, we wanted a lot of input from people themselves who are thinking about genetic testing. And after we had the first draft, there it is.
I'm just putting it up now so that people can see, gene test or not. That's right.
But we tested it. 1,200 people looked at it and gave us feedback. And their verdict, 93% of them found it helpful or very helpful and would recommend it to others. Some of the 7% who didn't find it helpful said, well, most of them said they already knew the information. In addition, they gave us a very helpful feedback on how to improve this online tool, and we made their changes, the changes they suggested.
What were some of the recommendations?
Well, they wanted many different learning styles to be addressed by the tool. So there were people who wanted lots of detail and lots of text. And for them, we gave links to more detailed information, but we didn't confront them with a whole lot of material as they went to the site. There were visual learners who wanted the statistical information, the probabilities to be presented in a visual way. There were auditory learners who wanted to hear things, and so we had video vignettes. We used actors, but they were using the real words of people from my interviews. And so they wanted different learning styles to be addressed. They wanted it clear, they wanted it simple, and they wanted the pros and cons, the benefits and burdens, to be presented in a balanced way. They didn't want to feel that they were being encouraged to go one way or another. Indeed, the tool has no position. It just wants people to consider genetic testing in an informed way and make the best decisions for themselves at this time.
Another point I wanted to raise is, as some people seek clinical trial participation, the genetic carriers are often highly sought out, especially in the prevention studies for Alzheimer's.
Absolutely.
So how does that, a lot of these studies say we need you to have homozygous 2 copies of 4, to participate or something. So even though, if you say, I don't want to know, if you're accepted in the study, then you obviously know. So how is this kind of changing the kind of issues surrounding clinical trial participation?
Well, yes. For many studies, obviously they want people at the highest risk so they can best test any preventions or cures. And here you have to really do the thinking ahead of time to see if you are willing to accept the fact that the testing may find that you are at higher risk. It will allow you entry into the trial, but it may also, bring some of the burdens that we've discussed, that there could be family issues, or you could personally be very adversely affected by it. Some people told me it was like a cloud over their head every day when they got up. Every time they forgot where they put the car keys, they thought this is the day. And so you really have to think about, what suits you, what is best for you before you enter a trial. If you are entering a trial and then you get the information during the trial, if that genetic information is developed, you should be, again, offered the opportunity to learn or not learn any genetic information about yourself that was developed during a trial.
Absolutely. What about, okay, so we're talking, the title of this talk are the pros and the cons. We've talked about kind of caution around testing, what you need to consider. What would you say the pros are about genetic testing?
The pros. Well, you have to think of this as three levels. The personal level, the pros are if you find out you're at higher risk, you could start taking steps. You could not postpone. Many people said they didn't want to postpone things like trips or experiences until their retirement. They did it sooner, and they made arrangements, financial and healthcare arrangements for themselves. And they kept up to date on new findings and advances that would pertain to them. That was the personal level. At the family level, some of the pros are, well, genes are shared in families, so you could alert others in the family if you have inherited one or two copies of the ApoE4 gene, that they may also have inherited it, and maybe they can use that information to advance their own health and be better off for having the information. And then there is the extra advantage, which I call advantage the social level, is that you can participate in research and help advance the field. So those are most of the pros that I heard from the people I talked to.
It's as we explore more and find out more about different variants. I mean, with Alzheimer's, we're talking about the risk gene, which is E4, ApoE4. But then now there have been identified in recent years the early onset markers, APP, presenilin 1 and 2, and those pretty much, I mean, you're not going to find that out with your 23andMe. But if people are seeking that information, I mean, that's a really hard one to understand, because with those markers, you're pretty much, you have the marker for early onset. It's not a risk, it's more a determinant, right?
Yes.
So as we get better at assessing, as geneticists get better, I'm assuming we're going to come up with this, not only with Alzheimer's, but with other diseases where new variants are being discovered that are determinant for disease.
Well, yeah, it's already happened. I mean, the field of genetics is well experienced in this, because one of the first one of the first genetic tests for Huntington was for Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is late onset, but if you have the gene, you will develop the disorder. And there's a whole protocol that has been established to prepare people. It's a multi-step protocol. Nobody proceeds headlong into Huntington's disease testing. This interesting thing is, before the test was available, the people who were at risk, who had a parent who had developed Huntington's, were asked if they wanted to have a test that would tell them. And 90% said yes. Then the test was developed, and only 10% of people took advantage of it, because many decided, as one woman told me, the comfort of the uncertainty was what she wanted.
Yeah.
She didn't want to be burdened.
Yeah, I could understand that, actually. We have another question that's come in, and I'm not sure you can answer this, but you might know a bit from, Holly's asking, if you find out, then can you be denied long-term care insurance? Now, that's obviously a big factor for everyone, and you mentioned it earlier. Will my employer find out? Will my insurance find out? And how will that impact me later in life if I have long-term care?
Well, that's a great question. And what I can say about it is that there is a federal law, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, which nobody likes to say, so we call it GINA, G-I-N-A. And that offers some protections against the use of genetic information when obtaining health insurance and in the workplace. But it does not cover long-term care insurance or the disability insurance or life insurance. So if you have had a genetic test that indicates you're at higher risk, it's going to be very difficult to get affordable forms of that insurance. Some people in the field say, look, before you have testing, get the insurance, and then you have to tell the truth when you apply. You can't say you don't know. But if you're concerned, get that insurance. I'm not informed enough about insurance coverage to know what happens if you already know. I have heard people say that the cost of long-term care insurance was very high anyway, and it might be that you could get it, but it might be unaffordable. But I can't answer. But
we'll have to do another talk on that one. Yeah, with an insurance expert.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Doris. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I know it's a topic that a lot of people care about now, and we'll link to your site because I think it's a great resource for people. And yeah, keep us posted on any future research. If you have any other insights to share with us, please keep us abreast of them.
I absolutely will.
Thanks a lot for joining us. And if you want more information on genetics, don't forget to download the Being Patient Interactive Guide on the Alzheimer's genes. My producer can post it in this, and go to our website too and click interactive guides, and you'll see them there for more information. Thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you next time.